You ever notice how some rooms get quiet in a way that just feels heavy? Not because anything dramatic happened, but because something did not happen. Something that should have been talked about, addressed, or healed, but it just wasn't. Maybe you felt it at a family gathering where everyone laughs in the right places, yet no one quite meets another person's gaze. Or maybe it shows up at church. Two believers who used to talk easily now pass each other with polite nods, as if nothing ever changed. Or maybe it's you. Maybe there's someone whose name comes up and your heart tightens before you even have time to think about why. And if you're honest, most of us know exactly who that person is. Well, what's strange is that none of this feels like conflict. There's no argument, no raised voices, no dramatic event that you can point to. Everyone's being civil. Everyone's keeping the peace. At least that's what we tell ourselves. But sometimes silence looks a lot like peace until you get close enough to hear the echo of what hasn't been said. Most of us don't wake up and think, I'm going to avoid someone today. We just get used to the distance. We learn which topics to skip, which invitations to politely decline, and which aisles at church to help us avoid awkward greetings. After a while, it feels normal. Normal enough that we stop asking whether it's healthy. Maybe you've had that experience where you run into someone you haven't spoken to in months. You smile, exchange a quick greeting, and maybe even make a small joke. And afterwards, in the car or late at night, something inside you whispers, that wasn't whole. There was a crack beneath the surface that the conversation didn't quite hide. And the longer it sits there, the more you begin to wonder if you've been calling something peace that isn't really peace at all. What we rarely notice is the quiet cost of settling for distance. Relationships that once felt natural now feel calculated. You think through what to say, how much to reveal, what not to bring up. And trust doesn't vanish overnight. It thins out, strand by strand. You start rehearsing conversations in your head, imagining what you might say, how they might react. And then, almost every time, you decide, it's not worth it. This is how distance becomes a habit, not chosen aggressively, chosen gently, chosen quietly, chosen just enough to keep the peace, or at least the appearance of it. Maybe you've said things like, oh, we're fine, or we just don't talk much anymore, or it's easier to keep things light. And maybe all of those feel true, but sometimes easier only means quieter and not better. Think about how many relationships drift like this. Siblings who once shared everything now keep everything shallow. Friendships that used to carry warmth now survive on memories. Church members who once prayed together now avoid meaningful eye contact. Not because there was a major blow up, but because something small went unaddressed, and then something else, and then something else, until the silence became the safest option. Every one of us is familiar with this kind of peace, the kind that doesn't disrupt anything, the kind that doesn't require courage, the kind that lets us avoid vulnerability, the kind that keeps the waters calm, but the heart unsettled. It feels safe, but it never feels whole. And here's the part we don't usually say out loud. Most people live in this version of peace for years without realizing anything is wrong. They assume this is just what adulthood feels like, that closeness slowly fades, that people drift, that silence is maturity, and that we're fine is good enough. But what if it's not fine? What if the distance you've accepted isn't normal at all? What if those quiet fractures aren't just personality differences, but signals that something deeper is missing? Somewhere in the middle of all of this, it helps to know something simple but surprising. Most of us don't realize the Bible actually speaks to this kind of quiet distance, not with shame, but with hope. Well, hi. If we haven't met, my name is Dwight Schettler, and I serve as president of Ambassadors of Reconciliation, where we help people reconcile. If you're interested in more information, I encourage you to join a group that we're starting called Ambassadors of Reconciliation. There's a link to this in the description below. There you can get access to tons of free content about how to reconcile according to the Bible. You know, this is where the turning point begins. Not with blame and not with big solutions, just with honesty. The honesty to say something doesn't feel right, even if you can't articulate why. The honesty to recognize that the polite distance you've settled for might be covering up a bruise you never let heal. The honesty to admit that the peace you're experiencing might not be peace at all. Every healed relationship begins with this moment. The moment someone recognizes that silence is not the same thing as wholeness. Maybe there's a name for what you've been feeling. Maybe there's a way to understand the ache that sits beneath the calm. And maybe there is peace that looks nothing like avoidance and everything like restoration. And maybe, just maybe, the relationships you quietly have written off are not as finished as they seem. So let me leave you with a question that's worth sitting with for a moment. What if the peace you've accepted is not the peace God intends to give? What if the distance you've grown comfortable with isn't the end of the story? And what if real peace, deeper peace, honest peace, healing peace is closer than you think? If something inside of you is stirring, if any part of this feels familiar, please stay with me. In the next video, we're going to talk about why this kind of quiet distance matters and how Scripture offers a peace that doesn't just avoid conflict, but transforms it. Because real peace does exist, and it's far more beautiful and far more possible than silence. And I'll see you in the next video.